Hello, hello. Welcome to Media Queen TV. I am so excited to be introducing our amazing guest today. This man is an absolute legend in the entertainment industry, and he's actually 88 years of age. Phenomenal. He's got 5 children, 8 grandchildren, 15 great-grandchildren. He is an Australian Gold Logie-winning character actor, TV personality, singer and variety entertainer, and well-loved right across the globe. Welcome, Barry Crocker.
Thank you, Aldwyn, and welcome to you, the first day of summer. Isn't it lovely?
It is absolutely glorious. It's a scorcher here on the Gold Coast.
Up on the Gold Coast. Yeah, no, well, it's pretty muggy down here in Sydney. You know, that's one of those sort of things we've got to put up with. But yes, I'm 88. And of course, sad thing about being 88 on the outside, I'm 88. But the tragedy is on the inside, I feel 88. always start with a joke. That's what they say, you know. Yeah, no, it's one of those things that we learn in show business. Start with a joke, and they might like you a bit better. I don't know. But, yes, no, it's a lovely day here in Sydney. The sun is shining, and we're talking to Aldwyn, who's a beautiful girl, and what a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Now, I actually interviewed you. We just worked out 2002 it was when I was working for the Sun newspapers, when you did Barry Crocker's banjo back then at the Gold Coast Arts Centre. You did the solo show and you toured all around the place with that. Extraordinary. Yeah. And I must say, you really have a fantastic style about you. You're very lovable and you've got a lovely personality, really down-to-earth guy. And I'm sure there's a lot that upcoming performers and creatives can learn from you. So I'd love to go right back to the beginning and look at how you started in the industry.
Okay, you know, all those beautiful words. Are you married?
No, single, never married.
Oh, kids. I can't believe that. That's hard to believe. Yeah,
I know.
If you want to go back to the very beginning, when I was 3 years as an amateur with the Geelong Musical Comedy Society. I followed a girl into that. I had no idea that I was going to be an entertainer. It was one of those things. I just followed my sex drive and finished up after 3 years loving the business. And when I got the first offer to go professional, I remember my mother said to me, you know, you may be 20, but you've got the brain of a 12-year-old. Don't be stupid, you know. But I was stupid, so I went into becoming a professional. And I joined a show called Variety on Parade, which was a touring show. 8 people were in it. And we toured all the country towns around Victoria, the smallest to the biggest. And it was one of those things where it was a show where performers who were on the way down were in it, and the ones on the way up were in it. And it was a 50-50 mix. And I was on the one that was on the way up. So I learned so much from these professionals, you know, or how to get into show business, how to tell a joke, and the pitfalls of the industry. And I did that for a whole year. And I thought by the end of the year, I was pretty good. So I auditioned for J.C. Williamson's in Melbourne. And I thought, yeah, I'll just like the Geelong Musical Comedy Company, where I'd gone from the chorus into leading roles. It would be like that. And the guy who was doing the audition, he said to me, Barry, yes, you've got a bit of talent there. He said, but look, we can't use you. I mean, you're too tall. I mean, you take attention away from the lead singer. We can't put you in the chorus. Look, son, you're either going to have to be a star or nothing. Well, of course, that was a smack in the face. And, you know, I left that Her Majesty's Theatre that day very, very weary and very, very down. But I went into cabaret, so around all the cappuccino circuit, which was a place where acts went in those days, and you get 5 quid, you know, and it was always cappuccino. We used to call it the cappuccino soap fibre. And you might do 2 or 3 of those a night if you were lucky. So that's from that I graduated, and slowly, you know, the career took off. And you know, you go from one thing to another, and hopefully you keep climbing up the ladder, and that's what I did.
Amazing. 3 years of amateur theatre before you started. That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, that goes to show a lot of staying power then, and you didn't let that obviously hold you back, the fact that they said, you know, either have to step up and be a star or nothing. And how tall are you exactly, for those who don't know?
in those days, I used to be 6'3", and that's in the old measurements, because I mean, look, I don't know what they should have waited till all the old people are dead before they changed all that. You know, I was 6'3". I think now, as you get older, you shrink, and I think I'm probably about 6'1" now. You know, so I'm happy with that. You know, because yes, people always in those days they'd have all the jokes. Must be cold up there. You got snow up there on the mountains. You know, you get all that sort of stuff. But now, of course, Australian guys, you know, 6'3" is a normal measurement. I mean, you get most of the athletic guys, or even the people in show business, are well over that, 6'5", 6'6", you know, and upwards. So, you know, I'm just an average guy today. So that's where that goes. Yeah.
Yes, I think there's a lot of hormones in the food now. Makes some of these young ones very tall nowadays. It wouldn't surprise me that growth hormones in the food, particularly chicken and things like that. So was there a point in your life that you think that things sort of really pivoted for you, where you were maybe chugging along doing your bit in the entertainment industry, and then there was something happened and suddenly you became very well known? Was there a turning point like that?
There was really a turning point in the sense of where becoming normally getting a lot of work, but low wages and things like that. And I went to Queensland to further my career up there at the Theatre Royal. And while I was up there, this young performer from England called David Clark, he came to me one night after a show and he said, I'd really like to be an all-round entertainer. And he said, will you help me? And I said, yes, of course. So I invited him over to the house where we were. And we started singing together. And I told him a few of the things that I'd learned. And he picked up on that very quickly. And my wife at the time, Dean, heard us singing. And she said, it really that's pretty good, you know. So what happened then, we formed a little trio that was myself, David, and my wife. And it sounded really good, you know. So I got a few bookings up there on the Gold Coast for the trio. And then eventually Dean said, look, I don't want to be in this, you know, I've got children coming now and, you know, I can't do it. So David and I became a single act. And so we were still making a reasonable living, but we weren't on the high hog, you know. So we decided to go down to Victoria and test the waters there with television and everything. And we went down there, and all of a sudden we became the hottest sort of act around, you know, Crocker and Clark. And so we were on the television with Graham Kennedy and Bert Newton and all these people. And the act went really well, and our fees started going up. And so that was the start of it. Then the Tivoli came along, they saw the act, and they said, you know, that's pretty good. We'll put you into the Sabrina show if you'd like to join us. So we said, yeah. I mean, the Tivoli was the cream of entertainment in those days. So we joined Sabrina with the show, and we initially they said, from America, Crocker and Clark. And of course, then we had to start doing the act with American accents. You know, hi, I'm Barry Crocker. You know, which was a terrible lie. And until when we were touring in Adelaide, a real American came up to us after the show at the stage door and said, hey, I saw you guys in Las Vegas. You're terrific. And I said, gulp, we can't do this anymore. So, so then, of course, our success with the Tivoli was wonderful. And, then they said, we want to continue with it because we're going to bring out Tommy Steele, who was the hottest English rock star, who wanted to be an all-round entertainer, he was, you know. And so we're going to put you into that show. I said, great. And our salary went up a little more. And all of a sudden, we were hot. We were pretty hot, you know. And so that's when it really clicked in. And then after 4 years, David said, I want to do a single act, so we're going to break up. I said, what? Because we had this offer to go to America because Martin and Lewis had broken up, and this American entrepreneur said, look, you know, there's not a double act now. You can come and live on my property, and we'll get some act doctors in, you know, we'll tart everything up and make it really professional and polished. And I said, that's wonderful, wonderful. And David suddenly said, I want to go single. So I could have killed him at that time. But so all of a sudden I was a solo actor again. And David went off to England, and he made a movie over there, and got mixed up with the Kray brothers, who were the notorious London gangsters, and they decided they'd become his manager. So he had great problems with them. And so I decided that I would go on the tour that the acts, the good acts in those days, were doing, like touring into the East. Because in those days, places like the Philippines and or where Kuala Lumpur, where do we go? All over. They built these edifices that they'd seen on television or in the movies. So they built these incredible cabaret rooms that even in America they didn't have them as yet. You know, so I had to get two girls, and so I auditioned two girls and myself, and I put together this act, and with that we toured all around the East and finished up in Israel. We were there for nearly 6 months, going to at the Sabra Club in Tel Aviv, which is a pretty hot spot at the moment, unfortunately. And we'd go out to the kibbutzes and all that sort of thing. Then I went to England, and David, I was going to stay with David, and he said, well, look, the Kray brothers want to kill me. So,
oh my gosh.
You better find accommodation. So I went to the Overseas Visitors Club, which was a place where all the Australians went at the weekend, you know, and they said, we'll give you accommodation if you do the cabaret every second week. And I jumped at that, of course. And because I'd already booked to entertain the American forces, some of which we'd done on the Eastern tour. And so, you know, that was one of those times when I was sending money home, of course, to support the family, because I was still following this dream that my mother always said, get a proper job. It was one of those sort of situations. And so anyway, I worked hard, and I starved myself. I lost about a stone before I got onto the American bases, and I had great success there. And I came back into England, and all of a sudden I said, I'm going to come home to Australia, because I've been away for some time, you know, and I'd forgotten almost about the family and the growing family. So I decided to have a couple of weeks in New York. I had a mate there I met on the circuit in America, in Germany, I think it was. Yeah, Germany. We became good mates, and so I flew into New York, and I stayed with Bernie Travis, who was a comic, American comic, and you know, I went with him. He said, "Come and see my agent. I'll see if I've got some work." So I went along with Bernie to the agent, and the agent was more interested in what Bernie was telling him about my success with the American audiences. And Marvin Schneer was his name. He's a famous New York agent. And he said, how would you like to do a show here? And I said, what? And I thought, yeah, that would be great billing. I could put that on my resume, you know, direct from New York.
Yeah.
So anyway, Bernie, they didn't have a job for Bernie, which is unfortunate. And Marvin said, hey, Bernie, you take the guy down to the village barn, you know. He called Mr. Hallerwitz, he called him on the phone, you know. And he said, you're gonna get $25, do two spots and see how you go, you know. So I went down and I did my 2 spots at the village barn, which was quite a famous thing in the village in New York. And so the shows went well, and I was very happy with that. And the next morning, the phone rang in Bernie's flat, And Bernie picked it up. He said, "It's for you." And he said, "Hey, it's Marvin Schneer here." He said, "You did real good. You did real good, kid. Now, Mr. Horowitz wants to book you for the whole 2 weeks that you're here. You're going to double the money. How do you feel about that?" And I said, "Well, of course." I just said, "Yeah." And so it was a part of learning. And then I came back to Australia because some people with funny noses and Italian names had expressed interest in me because I was playing at the Bonsoir after the Village Bar. Bonsoir was then the hot cabaret. That's where Barbra Streisand was discovered, And so these people said, "We want you to come back as a solo act. We, want to invest some money in you." So this is wonderful. So I came back to Australia, and I had a mate here. His name was Neil Harrell. So I made him my manager, and he got me a gig at a place called the Lido in Melbourne, which was a beautiful cabaret. It was probably the most gorgeous cabaret that had ever been built in Australia. Eventually went broke, but it was this fantastic time. Had a 15-piece orchestra, had a ballet, had acts from overseas. And so I was the first Australian act that starred there. And it all went very, very well. And so all of a sudden, some people came down from Sydney, and they were putting together a television show called 66 and All That. And that was the year 1966. And they saw me and they said, we're putting together the show. Do you want to audition for it? And I said, yeah, okay. So I went up to Sydney, flew me up to Sydney, and I auditioned for it. And after a little while, a deal was done. I mean, Carol Ray, Neil Harrell, my agent or manager, negotiated, and they kept wanting to pay me low money, and he kept walking out the door. And so they had a meeting, and Carol was there, and they said, "Look, do you want him?" And the channel said, yes, we want him in the show. And she said, "Well, give him the bloody money." And they did, and 66 and All That ran for about 6 months. And then sort of collapsed in the ratings. And, I thought, I'm coming, from America, I kept getting messages, "When are you coming? We've got everything planned for you." And I said, "Look, I'm in the show." And before I knew it, Channel 10 had said, they said, "Look, we're closing up with 66 and All That." He said, "How do you feel about if we gave you your own show?" I said, "What? You're my own show?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, I got to make a phone call to America." So I said, "Look, the show won't last all that long, probably thirds. They've booked me for a 13-week season." I said, "After that, I'll come back." It's a long story, isn't it? Don't look about my career, how it started.
I'm loving it.
And so they gave me my own show. And all of a sudden, it took off. It took off. And to my amazement, we were knocking off, Graham Kennedy and Don Lane, who was a great mate of mine. We were knocking them off in the ratings. And then we decided to make twice a week. And one of the shows we decided to make sort of a more modern version of Bobby Lim's Sound of Music, which was on the 9 network. And we called it Barry Crocker's Say It With Music. And it was virtually the same, only we used a lot of young people and had young guest artists and all that sort of thing. Well, that took off. And before we knew it, we were beating the ratings of Bobby's show on 9. And so at the end of the first year, I was quite a star, I guess, for 10. And Les Peart, who was the manager then of the 10 network, called me into the office at the end of the year. And he said, "We're very pleased with the ratings and it's doing great, but we want to take your name off the show to give the other people more gravitas." And I said, well, I said, "I'm the one leading the show. I said, why would you want to do that? And they said, no, that's what we want to do, Barry. And I said, well, I can't. No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. So I resigned. And my friend Neil Williams, who was in my show, and he said, you can't. No one resigns from television. That's murder. You'll die a death, and you'll just fade away. Don't resign. I said, no. My father always told me, do the right thing by yourself, which I did. So I resigned. And of course, then for the next 6 months, nothing happened, and they started the show with the new people, and I thought, well, maybe Neil was right. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, a guy called Bruce Gingell called from Channel 9 network. He said, what are you doing, Barry? And I said, well, nothing much. I'm doing the shows. The cabaret, of course, kept me living because it was from television. Of course, you know, the cabaret was a wonderful money earner in those days. You know, places were playing 6 days a week, you know, with good salary for the entertainers. So it was that kept me, but I was a bit worried about the television. And so Bruce Gingell said, what are you doing? I said, nothing much. He said, can we have a meeting? Anyway, that meeting came out with the offer to take over from Bobby Lim, because Bobby was going to leave his show and go to the 10 network, which was really weird. So we had 2 Sound of Musics. We had Bobby Lim's Sound of Music on 10, Barry Crocker's Sound of Music on 9. Well, it was a wonderful combination, but we found that 9, being the bigger station with more viewers, became the catalyst for great ratings, and that's when I won the Gold Logie and 3 other Logies, and Bobby's show sort of faded away on the 10 network. So I'd done the right thing, but that's basically where. Then, of course, after that, I went back and worked in America, became a bit of a star over there, working with people like Michelle Lee and Tommy Tune on Broadway, and you know, the whole thing was escalating. I was working in Las Vegas, and so, you know, it was all wonderful. So that's basically where I got up to, and did the Jerry Lewis telethon 2 years in a row, which was with all the other stars that came on there. You know, it was like a telethon to raise money for muscular dystrophy. And so I did 1976 and 77. And this, of course, it went to a network, went right across America. Millions and millions of people on the Love Network saw me. But what I found basically was that, you know, I was missing Australia, and I'd planned to bring Doreen and the kids over, but that was never going to happen because they were sort of settled here. They were in school and all that sort of stuff. So I decided to come home, and then you know, I went from this to that to this to this. And here we are today. I'm an old man at 88, but I'm still an all-round entertainer. I'm hoping I'm entertaining, you know. I'm going to take a swig of my water out of a bottle. I know it's terrible, but
wow, what an extraordinary career you've had. And there's a great saying that says, you know, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And you know, you stayed on course. You were true to yourself, and I love that you were like that, and that you said no to Channel 10 at that point, and you didn't know what was around the corner. However, you knew that wasn't right by you. And how often has that come up for you in your life, where it's been important for you to trust your intuition with making decisions on different shows and different opportunities that came your way?
Well, one of the first times it happened was when I was working on the Gold Coast. This is going back to, I suppose, 1957, 58. It's a long time ago, isn't it? My God. And I had a show going down there at Bill Gollan's Palm Lounge. I don't know if it's still there, but so I used to do a thing in the show, which was a sort of a rock and roll version of Waltzing Matilda. And it was a highlight of my concert. And so I was in the beer garden one day on a Sunday watching Stan Bourne, who was then he had a band in the beer garden. You know, that was a very popular place. And Mr. Corman, who owned a lot of things, was a multimillionaire, and he had two sons, and they'd been to see me in the show, and I was sitting there enjoying the show, and all of a sudden, a guy came over to me and he said, "Mr. Gorman would like you to get up and sing the Waltzing Matilda Rock." And I said, "No, I can't do that because I'm working at Bill's. You know, it would be wrong to give a show. You know, I'd thank him very, very much." And so then 10 minutes went by, and the same guy came back. He said, "Look," he said, "Mr. Gorman wants you to do the show for his sons, you know, and want you to sing rock and roll, Waltzing Matilda." I said, "No." He said, "Well, he's prepared to give you £25, which was a lot of money for me back then." And I said, "No, look, I've got to stand by my belief, and you know, I think I'd be doing the wrong thing if I performed here." And so that was the end of that. But when I went back to Melbourne, all the hotels that Mr. Gorman owned had cancelled my shows. And so I said to my father, you know, I said, he's cancelled all my shows, Dad, you know. And he said, "Well, don't worry about it. You did the right thing, son." He said, "He'll get his own. It'll come back on him, you know," which it did, because it became part of a giant scandal in those days. And he lost everything. So I don't know where he is today. I think he wouldn't be with us. But that was, I think, the first time when I stood up for what I believed. And there were many times when I, you know, did it. But I stood up, you know, yeah.
Amazing. Now, you actually sang for Frank Sinatra, I believe, at one time. Can you tell us about that?
Frank Sinatra, that's... My goodness, you know, I think Frank Sinatra has got to be responsible for a lot of the mistakes I made in my life, because when I was a young teenager, you know, he was the king of the world. And he used to have all these wonderful, beautiful broads around him, and he was a drinker and a smoker, and, you know, I wanted to emulate him, and I sang his songs and did all this sort of stuff. And he was a giant star to me, so I wanted to emulate him, and I put a lot of his songs into my show. And so it's a bit of a long story, which I hope you bear with me. So going back to Crocker and Clark, we were working in Melbourne at the time, and it was about 1959, 60, either of those years. And they were shooting a movie in Melbourne at that time, called On the Beach, with it was Gregory Peck, I'm trying to think of the dancer's name, Fred Astaire. That's it. Sometimes the brain goes a senior moment, and Ava Gardner. Now, Ava Gardner at that time was one of the most beautiful women in the world, of course, and was estranged from Sinatra, and it had been in all the papers and everything that he was going to come back to Australia and try and win her back, you know. So I'd read all about this and everything, and we were staying in a place in Toorak. We had a little one-bedroom place which we shared, and we found out that Ava Gardner, who was living in the same street, was going to have a huge party on this Saturday night. And so we went out and we did our shows, and coming back, we were driving up the road where we both lived, and we heard all this noise coming from this balcony, and there were lights and action everywhere. All the beautiful people were running around and dancing. And I stopped the car outside there, and I said, "Wouldn't it be wonderful, Dave?" I said, "if we were invited to a party like that." He said, "Yeah." "Think again, pal," he said. You know. And so then I had one of those brain phases where you say, "You can do this, you can make this work." And I found out that I couldn't, because what happened is I thought, if I sing underneath the balcony here, she'll think that it's Sinatra and we might get invited into the party, you know. And David said, "Are you crazy?" So I got out of the car and I stood underneath the balcony. I said, "When somebody loves you, it's no good unless he loves you." And all of a sudden, it all went quiet. You have to, and then it's this beautiful lady and a tall lady with a white caftan came to the balcony, you know, and I said, "Oh, I better keep all the way, happy to be near you." And when her eyes became accustomed to the gloom, as the saying goes, she realized that this underneath the balcony was this possum trying to get into a party or something, whatever he was doing. So the bottle of champagne that she was carrying suddenly became an airborne obstacle and came flying through the air and crashed at my feet, missing my head by about 2 inches, shattered, you know, and immediately I had a shrinking of the shrinker. I jumped back in the car and drove for my life. So that's how that started. And so getting on with Sinatra. So, you know, I used to go see all these concerts and everything like that. And eventually it came down to, you can't dream too big if you're a performer, because I had no idea in those days, Crocker and Clark, or even after that, that I'd ever get to meet Frank Sinatra or be in his company, you know. But what I found is that it can happen. It happened with when I was doing with the musical comedy company with Doreen, my dean, my wife. When we used to go and see those shows, MGM Spectacles with Catherine Grayson and Howard Gill, and they were marvelous, huge. And we'd go home and we'd practice the duets and all that sort of thing, never realizing that one day Howard Keel and Catherine Grayson would come to my house in Wahroonga for dinner. You know, the same thing happened with Sinatra. So I'm in Los Angeles at the time, and I was working there with Helen Reddy, and we'd just finished the season at Harrah's. And she said, "Oh, you've landed at the right time, Baz." She said, "Because I'm doing this big charity show with Frank Sinatra." I said, "Really?" "Yes, it's a charity for the Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and he's pulled in a few friends to help him. And he's got Frank Sinatra and friends. They got Cary Grant is going to be the compere. We got Foster Brooks is going to. That was a very famous comedian. Then they used to play drunk. Benny Goodman would do his last performance there. Gene Kelly would dance singing in the rain with all the hoses and everything going." And she said, "Would you like to come?" And I said, "Are you kidding? Of course I would." So I was sitting in a $1,000 seat at this vast auditorium in Los Angeles. It's courtesy of Helen, of course. And the front seats were $5,000 and $10,000. So all the hoi polloi of Hollywood was there. And you had Johnny Carson, Burt Reynolds, everyone that you could think of. And they wanted to be seen at the benefit. So, but I had the little tag that said access all areas. So after the show was finished, which was absolutely magnificent, Helen was the only girl on the show. I went backstage, you know, past Jilly, who was Sinatra's bodyguard at the time. And so I went backstage, and I was in the vast room where lots of food had been laid out and drinks and all that sort of stuff. And I was there with Jeff Wald, who was married to Helen at the time. And we were talking, and he introduced me to Gene Kelly. And I thought, wow. You know. And so Gene and I talked about Australia, and he was very interested in this and that. And I thought, I'm having a wonderful time. And all of a sudden, the door opened, and before I even knew it, I knew it was Sinatra, you know. And Sinatra opened the door and came into that vast room. And this is after he'd been down in Australia and had that big kerfuffle with all the lady journalists here, and had called them two bob or $2 hookers, and so it was, and he had to fly out of Australia and had things with Bob Hawke where they had to settle all different things. So when he came through the door, and Jeff Wald said, "Hey Frank, come over here. I want you to meet the biggest star in Australia." So Sinatra came over, and I just off the top of my head, I said, "Don't hit me." And I don't know why I said it. I just did, And he laughed, thank God, and he shook my hand. He said, "Hi, I'm Frank Sinatra." I said, "Really?" And so we chatted for about 30 seconds. He said, "You must excuse me. I have some people to meet, of course, all of the stars." And so I actually shook the hand of Frank Sinatra, and
wow.
it was, and I used to tell all my mates, "You want to get a bit of DNA here? Shake my hand." So that was the first time. The second time that it came to fruition was with the Jerry Lewis telethon in 1976, when I was on there for the first time, when I was working at the MGM Grand, and with the telethon, as I mentioned, they had all the great stars that were on the telethon, the Love Network for Jerry Lewis, and that was the show, by the way, that Sinatra had decided that the hold up with the friendship of Martin and Lewis, who hadn't spoken for 18 years, he was going to mend that. So he brought Dean Martin back onto that show, and they made this very famous, appearance, and sort of got back together for that brief moment. So everyone was watching that show that night, and my spot was, I think, at 1:10 in the morning after my shows at the MGM. And so what they'd been promoting all night was Sinatra is here, and you got to see this reunion, So I was sitting watching the television in my room in the MGM, and there they were. They made the introductions, and it was great. It was wonderful. Everything was fantastic. And then the rest of the evening, I kept doing promos for, catch this, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis back together and all that sort of stuff. So I thought this is wonderful. So I one of the songs I was doing on the telethon was "Corner of the Sky" with a Tony Hatch arrangement, and so I rehearsed it and everything with the Brown Orchestra, 50-piece orchestra, and so I was introduced, and I went up onto the stage, and Jerry Lewis introduced me, and I started singing "Corner of the Sky," and I looked down, and at one of the benches, there was Sinatra next to Joan Warwick, reading out donations, And I thought, oh my God, I'm singing in front of Frank Sinatra. And so I knew I had to do it. So I didn't look at him. I was too scared to look at him, because in case he was busy doing other things or not paying attention. Anyway, I got to the end of the song, and I held the note a little bit longer than I normally did, and it was warmly reported. And I looked down at Sinatra finally, and he gave me one of those.
Wow.
And of course, to me, my career could have ended right there, because Frank Sinatra said I'd done something well, And of course, I would then once again Skype to all my friends, and the Frank Sinatra gave me the thumbs up, and they'd say stuff like, "Yeah, but what was his middle finger doing?" You get all that sort of. So they're my stories with Sinatra. So I never became friends with him, of course, but I did meet him, something I had never envisaged in my early career.
And who are some of the other standout people that you've met over the years? I mean, you've dropped some extraordinary names there, some people I certainly admired in my youth, and real legends of the entertainment industry. And of course, this is well before social media, well before mobile phones. When we got all our news from mainstream media, right? We just had, television had only just started. Radio was big for a long time, before TV got off and running. And so, the times are very different back there, where people would read the local paper, back to front back then. And the world was very different with media. So looking back at your life, who are some other really memorable people that you met and some experiences you had that really stand out?
Well, several. I met several of people. I mean, working at Lake Tahoe with Helen, you know, I met stars. The biggest star, of course, that I met with Helen was because she knew that I was a huge fan of Barbra Streisand. You know, I adored her and still do. I mean, she's just such a wonderful performer and such a great singer. You know, for someone who sings, her technique is brilliant. And so when I was working there, I'd met Diana Ross. She came into the dressing room with Helen and several other people that were playing at the different hotels and so forth. So I finished up at a party over at Hara's in Lake Tahoe, and there was quite a big bunch of people were there, different entertainers and their agents, all that sort of, you know, Hollywood crowd. And so Helen all of a sudden broke through the crowd and was brought over this lady that she was holding by the arm. And she said, "Barry, I want you to meet someone." I said, I said, "Yeah." She said, "Barry Crocker, Barbra Streisand." And I really had a conniption. Yeah. And you know, I'd with her, I mean, it was just, you know, I was the biggest fan in the world. It didn't matter that I killed them at the show over, you know, where we were working. You know, I was just this little kid, you know, because the first time was when I was working in New York at the Bonsoir, where she'd been, and I always tried to get in to see her show on Broadway called Funny Girl, which I'm sure everyone knows. And she was the star of Funny Girl. And I tried and tried and tried to get a ticket. And one day, you know, during the daytime, I'd always go along and ask, "Is there any chance of getting a ticket for Funny Girl?" And they'd say, no, it's booked out, sold. And one day the lady said to me, "Yeah, you're lucky in tonight because a house seat has come available and you can have it if you want." I said, "Yes, please." And so a house seat was meant that you were close to the front. And I remember sitting in the third row in the center, and out came Barbra Streisand and Funny Girl, and she was just so magnificent in that show. And after the show, I just sat there mesmerized in that third row. And eventually I looked around, the theater was empty, and an usherette came over and she said, "I'm afraid, sir, you'll have to leave." And you know, I was sort of dumbstruck, and what I'd seen was something remarkable, quite remarkable. And I remember walking around Broadway for about an hour, and I had tears streaming down my face. And I said, "Now that is a star. That's a true star." Anyway, getting back to meeting Barbra Streisand in Lake Tahoe, I had all those things floating around in my mind, you know. So I said something like, "Oh, it's so wonderful to meet you. I've always enjoyed your performances, and it's such a great thrill and gee, I think you're wonderful." She glazed over for a moment, and she said, I said, "Thank you for saying hello." And she wandered off, and Helen came back. She said, "What happened?" I said, "Well, I said I was tongue-tied." She said, "Well, I gave you a chance." And that was, I could have, if I was available, I could have dated Barbra Streisand if I'd had a brain. So that was, you know, of course, and you meet the divas, you know, Lainey Kazan, I worked for at the Playboy Club, and Liza Minnelli, of course, who was a dear friend of Katie Manning, who became my lady. Katie Manning is from Doctor Who. And so, you know, I met all these people, and of course, Sammy Davis Jr. And the story in my book, my latest memoir, I tell about all the different things that happened at the Sinatra concerts, and the wonderful time when Sinatra was supposed to be in a photograph with Liza Minnelli and Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and which never happened because Frank had a conniption that night and stormed off the stage and drove away in his limousine. Anyway, the photographs in the book that I got. So I met a lot of people, and I found most of them were just ordinary folk, and we sort of build up this image of them being so fantastic that we can't believe that they're just normal people, but they do go to the toilet and they have problems and they have disasters in marriages and they have breakdowns. And so we're all the same, we have all those things going for us, but it is nice to have met them. They're wonderful memories for me, for the various people. And so it's just been a sensational career from that point of view, and I've enjoyed it immensely. I'm retired now, of course, because after over 60 years, I said, have a lie down, which I'm doing.
Yeah, you still have a great sense of humour, though, and obviously that entertainment spirit is through and through with you. Now, my very good friend Lynn Santa introduced you to Priscilla Presley, the Priscilla Presley. And I'm very curious what you thought of Priscilla and how that was for you.
Well, I better have a little sip of this before. That's another story.
Yes. Now for the Priscilla story, coming right up.
Coming up while he puts his little earphone back in. I must have slippery ears or something, Anyway, so this goes back with Elvis and myself. This is one of those long stories that leads up to the ultimate ending. So when I was 19, I found out, with all the media and everything that was going around in those days, that this new young guy had come onto the scene and was blitzing America. His name was Elvis Presley. Well, since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell. And so I immediately jumped on the bandwagon and learned that song and sung it, put it into the act, which used to kill him. And so I found out that we'd been born the same year, so we're the same age. And so that was my first introduction to Elvis. And of course, over the years, I sang many of his songs, as with Sinatra, I sang many of their songs, because you just replicate in your own style, their medleys or whatever. And so, it ended up that after I'd been making the Barry McKenzie movies in England, I had the family over there with Dean and the children. And Dean, my wife, said, I can't stand another English winter. I've got to come back to Australia, which I said, okay. So I took the family and myself through Las Vegas, to on the way back, and California and LA, to give them a little treat, on the way back home. And so when we got to Las Vegas, of course, there were so many wonderful shows there and everything. I got tickets for Elvis Presley at the hotel where he's appearing, where he played that residency. I'm sure everyone's seen the movie. It was a great movie. Good on you, Baz Luhrmann. So we were sitting there, and Elvis came out, and through my little goggled eyes, I thought he was the best-looking guy I'd ever seen in my life. He looked magnificent. He had the white suit on with all the spangles and the scarves and everything, and it's just fantastic. And Dean, who I dragged around all these other shows and everything, was so tired that she kept falling asleep. I kept nudging her, saying, "It's Elvis, it's Elvis." And so she'd wake up for a second, then she'd go. So that was a joke in the family, that my wife had fallen asleep in Elvis Presley, who was the hottest star in the world at that time, 1973. And so I saw Elvis then, cut forward to lots of years later. And I was playing in a charity tournament at the White City here in Sydney, with different stars that were in the area at the time, a lot of local television stars, where we play. And I was a very amateur sort of type player, I was okay, but if I was playing as a 10-year-old boy, I wasn't too bad, but that was about it. Anyway, I was playing with with a gentleman who I can't mention now because he fell into disrepute after a while, but he was a very, very big star at the time. So I naturally wandered over and we started chatting, and we got on fine together. And he said, if ever you come to Las Vegas, look me up. And I took his number and everything, So more years went by, and all of a sudden I find I'm working in Las Vegas now. So I'll give him a call. So I called him. He said, yeah, hey, mate, come over here. Yeah. Great. So we got together in Vegas. And, it was just fantastic, because he took me everywhere. He introduced me to other stars that were playing in Vegas. He was a real, true, wonderful friend. And so what had happened at that point, Elvis had fallen ill, and he'd been asked to fill in for Elvis at his the hotel where he was working. And so he'd filled in for him, and he was working there. And at one of our meetings, one of our knockarounds in the afternoon, he said, you want to come and see Elvis's pad? I said, yeah. So he was staying in Elvis's apartment, which was on the top roof. And so we went back and opened the doors, and there in front of me was Elvis's playpen, if you like, because it was a vast thing, and it went out onto the balcony. You could have played a cricket match there. It was so huge and everything. So no, I was enamored with that. Took my little camera with me and did movies of it all and everything like that. So anyway, that was great. That was a great part of the Elvis story for me, Okay, cut to more years later, and my son Barry Jr. was now working in Los Angeles as a pastor, and his 50th birthday was coming up, and it had been organized that there was going to be this huge party for his 50th. And of course, back in Australia, we had sort of organized sorry we can't be there, so had all the family together singing, we are family. And I said, I'm terribly sorry, Barry, and we're so busy, and Dean is doing this and the kids got that, and we can't make it, but we just wish you all the best for a wonderful birthday. And sent him the email and with all the the accoutrements and all the bits and pieces and all the happy this and that. And so in the meantime, I'd been working with a lady called Lynn Santa, or Auntie Lynn, we always called her. Yes. And so, we did some wonderful charity things together with her children's books and, appearances, all raising money for the kids and all that sort of stuff. And I told her about, Barry's birthday and everything like that. And she said, oh, yeah. She said, how would you like to meet Priscilla? And I said, what? I said, how would you like to meet Priscilla? Priscilla Presley? She said, yeah. She said, we're friends. She said, yeah, she helps me with all the animal rescues and all that sort of stuff. She's a friend of mine, good mate. I said, you're kidding. She said, no, I'll get in touch, which she did. Of course, it was arranged that while I was in Los Angeles for Barry's birthday, that I would have a meeting with Priscilla Presley. And of course, I was very, chuffed about all that, So I had to hide away. I got there a couple of days in advance. And so came the day. I was staying in this hotel where they gifted me the room and everything because the guy who owned the hotel was an Australian. And he gifted me the room, and I thought it was all right. But it was, about a mid sort of, about, I suppose, 4-star, hotel. And it was okay. But when I was getting ready to see Priscilla, because all my friends had said, if you're going to meet Priscilla, this is the people who were around me at the time, wear casual gear, because you're going to go to the Polo Lounge, where all the hoi polloi and the go-getters go, so you just wear casual wear. And I said, just casual wear? I'm meeting Priscilla Presley, I said, no. So anyway, on the day of our proposed meeting, everything had been arranged and everything. We had a time. And so I jumped into the shower It's all written in the book. It's all in my book, by the way. I go through the whole thing, which is far more complicated and funny than I'm telling it now. So I'm in the shower, you know, luxuriously getting all ready and washing everything and making sure everything's squeaky clean. And so I'm singing a little song to myself, you know, and thinking of all the things and the joy that's going to happen. And so I step out of the bath. What I didn't realize, that the plastic shower curtain had been filling the floor with soapy suds, right?
Oh.
So I stepped out onto the floor, and all of a sudden I had this vision of a spider monkey, a nude spider monkey flying through the air.
Oh my gosh.
And so I crashed into the toilet seat, breaking it in half.
Oh, wow.
And it finished up on the floor, a crumpled heap. And I thought, oh, are you alive? I thought to myself, you know, and I said, yes, I must be alive, because I could hear myself breathing. And I thought, oh my God. And I had a small cut on my leg, and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I eventually, which I explain in a far more comedic way of telling it in the book, which is good. And but I pulled myself together and got dressed into my nice suit that I'd laid out previously to sort of, and I had, all I could think of was, I found out later that I'd fractured 3 of my ribs, but at that time I was going to meet Priscilla Presley. And so I said, I kept looking in the mirror saying, you can do this. You can do this. Come on, Barry, you can do this, you know. And so, you know, I kept this chant going, you can do this, you can do, much to the annoyance of the cab driver who took me to the Beverly Hills Hotel. I annoyed the hell out of him, you know. But I got out and I got into the room, and, you know, Priscilla was about 10 minutes late and I thought, oh, this is all a stitch up, you know. They've stitched me up. So Barry found out about it, and it's all part of a big ploy. You know, they're going to laugh at me and all that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, Priscilla appeared, and I matronly brought her over to my table. Mr. Crocker, this is Priscilla Presley. I said, yes, I know. We sat down, and got a lovely picture together. We sat there and until we were the last people in the restaurant, which was fabulous. We're the last people, and they kept flashing the lights to say that, you know, we have to prepare the evening meal. So we eventually left, and we'd spent 3 hours together, and we talked about Elvis and talked about the charities that she was involved with, all wonderful stuff, you know. And I when we were waiting for her car out where the pickup with the cars, I invited her to come to Barry's sermon on Sunday, and she said, I would have loved to have gone, but I'm taking my parents to another function that she was going to. Anyway, we had a lovely 10-minute chat waiting for the car, and then eventually she piled into a car and drove on to the night. And that was my care, well, provided by Lynn Santa, my meeting with Priscilla Presley. And of course, I was chuffed. It was part of the Elvis story that will remain with me forever.
Extraordinary. And Elvis was born 8th of January 1935, and
that's right.
You were 4th of November 1935. Yeah. So, my gosh,
yeah.
You've seen wars come and go. You've seen so much change in that time. You've been in so many shows in that time. Could you tell us a little bit about your role in Fiddler on the Roof?
Fiddler on the Roof. I'm going to take another swig.
Yes.
This is another one of those. They all kind of lead. It's easier when you're writing the book because you can describe everything that happens. And when I'm talking to you, of course, it's different.
Last of the Entertainers is the book, by the way, that Barry has, Last of the Entertainers. And thank you to everyone who's watching us live too. We've got Jeff Veal here from Manila. He says being tall is an asset. Rose Davidson, an extraordinary life, absolutely extraordinary life, Rose. And Jeff has put a few flames in there saying that this is a hot interview and a hot life. I'm sure he's referring to you there as well, Barry. So last of the
No, he
Yeah.
just might be looking at you too. I mean,
Oh, well, he could be saying I'm hot as well. Thank you, Jeff. Well, either
yeah.
way, it's all hot. We're heating up the screen here. And Lynn's here. She says, hi, Bazza. Thank you, Lynn, for
Thanks,
joining
Lynn.
us. Now, can we see the cover of your book while we're just about to talk about
Sure.
Fiddler on the
I just
let's have a
amazingly, I just happen to have a copy here.
fantastic.
There
Look
we
at
are.
that. Fantastic. Last of the Entertainers. I'm sure that'll be a scintillating read. We're just touching the surface here with this interview today.
Yeah.
But a lot more detail in that book, which you can get in
It's
all good
in
books.
there.
All good
It's
bookstores
all
for
in
that one. So you've done
Yeah.
lots of different shows. Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Fiddler on the Roof. I met an icon, a wonderful man, and it goes back to a story. I was in a musical play called Eureka, that was a local show. It was an Australian musical, which was a wonderful show, and it didn't receive the attention that it warranted, because it's a terrific show with Mike Harvey's music, and it was one of those shows that should have been a wonderful success, but because of timing and other things that were happening at that time, it lost a lot of money and ended up. But I played a wonderful part. I was an Irish drunkard on the gold fields of Eureka, of Ballarat, and I had a wonderful granddaughter who came over from Ireland to meet her grandpa, and it was this dishevelled old guy. Well, I was an old drunken Irishman like that, you see, who used to get knocked around by all the prostitutes on the gold fields and stuff like that, you see. But it was a terrific song. I had a wonderful song in it, and so it was a marvelous part. The show died, unfortunately. It was, as I said, it was a great show. Well, that's 6 months after that, I was sitting at home, and I had a call, and is that Barry Crocker? I said, yes. He said, my name is Tim. He said, I came to see Eureka, and I don't know if you remember, but I was part of the crowd after the show, and that came over and complimented you on your performance. I said, oh, well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I love playing that part, you know. And he said, the reason I'm calling, he said, I'm producing Fiddler on the Roof at the moment, which is coming into the theatre tour around Australia. And we've just had one of our casts drop out, Laser Wolf. And I said, I knew nothing about this, you know, Laser Wolf. He said, would you consider doing it? I said, well, I don't know. I could give you a reading if you like. I said, yeah, okay. So we arranged a reading, and as luck would have it, I was offered the part of Laser Wolf, which is the catalyst for Chaim, for the main character. Those things come into my mind, and
Yes.
so you know, we had it was like a double act, Topple and I, where we go back when he was a dairy farmer and I was a butcher, and of course in Jewish tradition, the milk and meat never mixed, so we never became friends. But I was the richest man in the town, and had managed to have this. Well, it was, I'd spoken to Yenta the matchmaker, and I was arranging to marry his daughter, who was about 40 years younger than me. You see, in those days, it was a tradition where, you know, the father would give the daughter and away. Anyway, that's all part of it. The meeting of Topple was wonderful, because I'd been given the part and I'd been rehearsing my little bits and pieces. And one day I was waiting outside the stage door of the theatre, and the white limo pulled up, and the door opened, and Topple turned out, and with two ladies. One was his wife and one was a friend, and Tim, the producer, and he said, "Topple, this is Barry Crocker. He's going to be playing Laser Wolf." And Topple was just knocked me off my feet when he says, "Oh, Barry Crocker, I've heard so much about you, Barry, and lovely to meet you." And of course, once again, you one of your idols. It was a wonderful moment. Anyway, the thing was that we worked this show, and there's so many stories in the book about what a great man he was and the things that he did for charities back, not only for the Jewish children, but also for the Arab children. He was just such a beautiful man, and we became firm friends. And it was one of those times, 2 years of touring around Australia and all the major capitals and New Zealand, when, I made a friend that would remain a friend until he died, sadly, earlier this year. I'd lost a great friend and a great man. So that's my part of that. That's my fiddle on the roof. But I go into it much more in the book.
Amazing. And you also we sang the original theme song for Neighbours.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours. It was number 1 in England about a year or two ago. Number 1. They regurgitated the whole thing. And I spat out my version of Neighbours because all the fans over there, it had been announced that Neighbours was going to finish, And so all the fans in England decided, no, this is no good. We've got to, bring the show back or save it, So they decided to make my version the number 1 hit in England, in the UK for that time. And I knocked Ed Sheeran and Adele off the charts. It was just ridiculous, But it all came about many years ago when I was sitting at home, once again, as you do, sitting watching television, and I got a call from Tony Hatch, and he said, "What are you doing?" Tony Hatch, the songwriter. I said, "Oh, just watching a bit of telly." He said, "I've written a theme song for a television show that they want to turn into a soap. Do you want to sing the title song for me?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." He said, "Well, come on over." And I was only about 10-15 minutes away where we lived. And so I drove over there, and he said, "This is called Neighbours. And it goes like this." And we listened to it. And so we made a demo of the song. So I sang, "Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours," etc., etc. And we did a couple of little stings and so forth. The whole thing was over in about an hour and a half. And so Tony put it all together and was on Reg Grundy, who was then the biggest sort of producer, I guess, of soaps in Australia. It was on his desk on the Monday morning. And so what happened is that Tony got the call on the Monday, and he said, Reg said, "We've got the theme." And Tony said, "Oh, what did you think?" And Reg said, "I love it. I love it." And he said, "You've won." He said, "We've had lots of entries." He said, "But I just love this Neighbours theme." And, the Crocker singing of it. And Tony, of course, said, "Oh, that's fabulous. What we'll do now, we'll do a proper recording of it, and we'll get it to you." He said, No. He said, "Don't touch it. Don't leave it the way it is." He said, "That's the version I want." And so I didn't have to do anything to do with Neighbours. And for the next 7 years, I received residuals for singing the song Neighbours. And then, of course, the people who had bought the show and from Grundy's, and someone probably said, "Why are we paying Crocker residuals? We can get a session singer in, he'll do it $500, and we don't have to pay him the royalties." So for 7 years, Neighbours was very kind to me, but then, of course, it became a more modern version of the song, But it's still going, Neighbours. I think that being number 1 helped a lot to get Amazon to pick up the show.
Yes, it certainly lasted the test of time. And what about your work with Variety? What did you do there?
For Variety, taking another swig of his water. Are we doing all right?
Yeah, we're doing great. I'm loving this. I mean, the time's just flying. And for those watching, if you have any questions for Barry or any comments, please let us know. We'd love this to be interactive as well.
Any old friends out there, give us a call.
Yeah.
With the Variety Club, there were wonderful days when, you know, I was at the height of my popularity, if you like. You know, everyone gets a chance in the limelight, and we were, you know, with a couple of hit movies behind me and a Gold Logie and television appearances, all that sort of stuff. And we were part of the Variety Club, which was then, well, still is, I guess, all the top entertainers would get together, you know, 2 or 3 times a year and have a big function where we'd raise funds for the Variety Club, which helped injured children or people working with difficulties, all that sort of stuff. We do it. And we you know, Tony Hatch and Jackie Trent, who was alive at the time, and other people and myself. And we used to do these shows, put them together, the Variety Heart Awards, and you know, all for charity. And we'd go to McDonald's and we'd sell hamburgers, and the kids would come in there and we'd act as makers of hamburgers. Ridiculous, you know. But it was fun. We made a lot of money, and so the variety thing was very, very important at the time. And of course, when times change, I mean, Tony and Jackie went back to England, and I sort of slowed down or went into other shows and things, and other people took over. But for those 5 to 10 years that we were doing it, you know, it was a wonderful raiser of funds, you know, for damaged children, I guess you could say.
Amazing. And I know Lynn did a Variety T-shirt relay as well, and she had a whole lot of people like Jackie Chan and people all over the world sign that T-shirt as well.
I wonder where that is now. It was a marvelous T-shirt. Everyone's on it. Even Bazza got it.
That's right. Yeah, Leo Sayer was on there, Darren Hinch. Actually, I took the photos of them. I was following Lynn around the countryside doing photos back then of that Variety T-shirt relay. So, it'd be interesting to see where that is now. That would be amazing. And now with the Barry Crocker's banjo, you know, I used to love Banjo Patterson as a kid. How did you come to actually doing that solo show? And what was it like doing a solo show? That's a big commitment to do a whole show on your own. What was that whole experience like for you, and why banjo?
Well, that's another one of those stories. It's covered perfectly in the book, because it's lots of Banjo Patterson came to mind. I think it was 1981 or something like that. And I was doing a show called It Could Be You on Channel 10, which is a very, very popular show. But it was one of those shows where you flew families out from foreign lands to meet the relations that they hadn't met, and it was wonderful. You know, it was so popular. But I think Rupert Murdoch owned the channel at the time, and they said, "How much are we spending on this show?" You know, and he said, "No, get rid of it." So I found myself, you know, doing a year of It Could Be You, and then I was sitting at home, and a gentleman called me up, and he said, "I'm getting one of those calls again." Bill was his name, and he said, "Barry," I said, "Yeah." He said, "Look," he said, "I've put together a show called Banjo the Man, and I think you'd be perfect in the show." And I said, "Oh." He said, "Do you know about Banjo Patterson?" And I said, yeah. He wrote Waltzing Matilda." He said, "That's right." He said, "The show it's an 8-hander, and we're going to take it all around Queensland and, you know, sort of present it." And, you know, anyway, I sort of knocked him back 2 or 3 times. And eventually, you know, he wore me down. I said, "Okay, yeah, I'll come on board," you know. So we went on board. And what I found, I was playing the younger banjo. And I played him in the show from 19 to 60. And other people would take over and became different characters in the show. And the show went very well. Everywhere we packed out, everywhere we went, you know, all up through the Gold Coast. And so Bill had decided that I'm going to take this show back into Sydney. And I said, oh, Bill, I said, Sydney, that's a different kettle of fish. I said, you know, I don't think the set that we're using, it's very handy for moving it around. But it's a bit cheap. You know, I think, you know, the flats we were using and everything, they have to be better than that. Lighting plots. He said, why? He said, why would we change anything that's making a fortune for us? And I said, well, I just think that you're going to die a death if you take that show as it is. It's all right for a country town, but not Sydney. And anyway, I said, he was adamant, and I once again, I left the show, you know, sadly, but I was proved right, because it had a very short run and wasn't successful. So that I felt sad about that, because it had been a good show. Anyway, several years go by, as they do, and I was asked by a friend of mine from the Variety Club. They said, you know, our grandson is having a christening at our farm, you know, and we know that you did Banjo, you know, Banjo of the Man a few years ago. Would you recite the bush christening at the christening? And of course I said, of course, yeah. So Katie Manning, who was my lady, and we went along to the function. And so there I was, this crowd of other people that were friends of the family, Variety Club people. And so I did the bush christening. Do you want to hear a little bit of it?
Yeah,
So,
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, you know, here I was. I said, on the out of our cool, where churches are few and men of religion are scanty, on a road never crossed, except by folks that are lost, one Michael McGee had a shanty. Now this Mike was the dad of a 10-year-old lad, plump, healthy and stoutly conditioned. He was strong as the best, but poor Mike had no rest, for his youngster had never been christened. And his wife used to cry, if the darling should die, St. Peter would not recognize him. But by luck he survived, till a preacher arrived, who agreed straight away to baptize him. Now the artful young rogue, while he held his collogue, with his ear to the keyhole was listening, and he muttered in fright, while his features turned white, what the devil he knows is Tristan. He was none of your dolts. He had seen them brand colts, and it seemed to his small understanding, if the man in the frock made him one of the flock, it must be in something very like Brandon. So away with a rush he set out for the bush, while the tears in his eyelids they glistened. "'Tis outrageous," said he, "the brand youngsters like me. I'll be dashed if I'll stop to be christened." Like a young native dog, he ran into a log, and his father, with language uncivil, never heeding the priest, cried aloud in his haste, "Come out and be christened, you devil!" But he lay there as snug as a bug in a rug, and his parents in vain might reprove him, till his reverend spoke. He was fond of a joke. I've a notion," said he, "that'll move him. Poke a stick up the log, give the spalpeen a prod. Oh, poke him easy, don't hurt him and maim him. 'Tis not long that he'll stand. I've the water at hand, as he rushes up this end, I'll name him. Oh, here he comes, and for shame, I've forgotten the name. Was it Patrick, or Michael, or Dennis? Here the youngster ran out, and the priest gave a shout, "Take your chance anyhow with McGuinness." As the howling young cub ran away to the scrub, where he knew that pursuit would be risky, the priest, as he fled, flung a flask at his head that was labelled McGuinness's whiskey. And McGuinness McGee has been made a JP, and the one thing he hates more than sin is to be asked by the folk who have heard the joke how he came to be christened McGuinness. Boom.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I got my clapping here. I'm going to give you a clap for that.
That's that. Yeah. Anyway, so then the party continued, and someone in the crowd. It's funny how fate steps in when these things happen. And someone else in the crowd, "Oh, that was terrific, Barry." And I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "Can you do the man from Snowy River?" And I said, "No, I can't, because I'd never." That wasn't in the play. They had an older actor who played the dying banjo, you know. I said, "No." And so I was coming back after after the recital of bush christening. And in the car, we're driving back, and I said to Kelly, do you think I could get a one-man show out of Banjo Patterson? And she just simply said, well, what have you got to lose? And so then for the next 2 years, I got every book that I could find. And not only that, but I found relations, people who were related to the various people in the stories, because I found a very different side of banjo from all the war stories and the writing of Waltzing Matilda. And I'd always wondered why Banjo Patterson had always refused to discuss the writing of Waltzing Matilda. And my mind was saying, well, why? So I traced one of the ancestors of people that were involved in the things that I'd read and everything, and I found a whole different world about banjo, and the reason why he didn't want to talk about the writing of Waltzing Matilda. And apart from all these war stories and everything, there was a different side to banjo, and he was a bit of a naughty boy in those days, and he was engaged to Sarah Riley for 7 years, a girl from Geelong, my hometown, from a good family, and 7 years. But when he went to up there into Queensland to one of the big stations up there, he fell in love with a girl, very much so, and he was absolutely besotted with her. And this came through amazing people that you meet. This was a wonderful lady by Mrs. Ballou, whose son became one of the premiers of Victoria, and she told a different story of what had happened there, and that Sarah Riley, his fiance, when she discovered this yearning that he had for the liaison with Christina McPherson, she broke off the engagement. She fled to England, never to return, or not until 10 years later. And Christina McPherson repaired to Wollongong, her hometown, and nothing was ever said about this. But it all came about that how he got to know Christina McPherson was that at the station where they were, they'd found an auto harp, which is like a very old sort of fashioned instrument, and she'd learned to pluck out a few tunes, and one was a song that she'd heard the Warrnambool band play, and it was Thou Bonnie Wood of Craiglee. It was an old-fashioned song. She did that, and of course, banjo being famous as the poet and everything, all the people at the station where they said, "Oh, you should write something with that. You should write the words to it," Of course, and he said, "Yeah, okay, I'll give it a shot." So then, when he went into the area where they were, into this little room, and they decided to write Waltzing Matilda. And of course, this is where the liaison took place. And Banjo had written a few different words, and it was very easy for him to write. And he said, Waltzing Matilda and leading a water bag, and he just wrote this down. And Waltzing Matilda. Now, he just wrote that very quickly. And what he found out was that German soldiers used to use their Matildas, which are the overcoats, as dancing partners during the wars, and they would dance with the Matildas. So we just put that in, that he never thought that the song would go anywhere except for the station where it was. But of course, it's one of those anomalies that happen, that when something that you don't believe is going to happen for you happens. And when he sang the song for the guests, they all thought it was wonderful. They said, "We're going to take it over to Oondaroo Station," which was a big giant station over there, and we're going to present the song there. So they went over, and they had a professional singer named Herbert Ramsay. He later became Sir Herbert Ramsay, who sang the song. So "Oh, there once was a swagman, a counting the belongs." He sang it. And they all loved it, and all of a sudden the song just took off. It became, so it was from Toon Gabby to Undaroo Station, everyone was singing this, and all the pubs, they were singing it. And, it became sort of almost a national anthem. But Banjo was very embarrassed about this, and he never wanted to discuss how he'd written this song. And so that's how Waltzing Matilda became about. And, but it was all with a bit of naughtiness on the side. But it's in the book, the whole story.
Book, the last of the entertainers.
Yeah, so anyway, I put this whole thing together, and we toured Barry Crocker's banjo all over Australia, all the major theatres, the Sydney Opera House, etc., etc. And it was a giant success. And then I stopped doing it, of course, and then COVID came along, and people were writing, when are you going to bring back banjo? I said, well, I don't know. I could do it now, because when I did the show, I did everything. I sang the songs, I did the poetry, I played banjo, the old man banjo himself, and I did all the different parts, and it was a one-man show. And so that was good. But when they said, when are you going to bring it back? I thought, well, I don't think I'm ever going to bring it back, but what I can do is do an audio play where it's a play that on audio. Yes, let's do that. But I had to get some friends, and I got Jack Thompson, who plays the narrator that I played, and Michael Caton, who plays Henry Lawson, and even used one of my daughters to do some of the narrations. And so we put together with Craig Gower, my musical director, we sat down for about 4 weeks, and we put together an audio play, which is available out there. If you're interested, you can go to Australian Theatre Live, or just Google up Barry Crocker's banjo, and it'll all come up there. And you can grab a copy of the audio play, which is we're all quite proud of it, because and use the headphones, because we put a lot of little extras in there that we didn't do with the live show. But that's basically the banjo story.
Amazing. I love that. And Jeff's saying here, it should be our national anthem, an absolute classic. Totally agree with that. And so many memories with Waltzing Matilda and the whole Banjo Patterson story. I'm sure it's very deep for a lot of people in Australia. And Lynn is confirming that the Variety T-shirt relay, where she had all the celebrities sign the T-shirt, it sold for $10,000 at Variety's 5-year National Bush Bash. That's wonderful. Yay.
Fabulous.
Awesome.
Fabulous.
Thank you for everyone who supported that. Jeff saying sharp. Yeah, thank you, Lynn. And Jeff saying sharp as a wit. You are absolutely, I don't know how you remember the things you remember, Barry. It's extraordinary. Sharp as a wit, Barry, time for a comeback. See, there's people that want you to come back to the stage. Will it ever happen again?
It's a very, very different world out there now. I don't think that the time would be right. I mean, little bits and pieces are okay, but I mean, it takes a lot, and for an 88-year-old bloke who maybe has a senior moment or two, I don't trust the mind that I used to have, which is, and it's basically because you don't do it. But I'm quite happy with what I've got, and and pleased to talk to a beautiful girl every once in a while. And
yeah, I love it. Lynn's giving some claps there. Someone else on Facebook here is saying, wonderful interview, Aldwyn, with Barry. Brought back my own memories of him as I grew up with him in my past. He was articulate and amusing even in his later years. He made me smile a lot, that he made my mood much lighter just listening to him. He had a glorious full life, a real live Aussie ocker. Oh, that's wonderful. Please let us know who you are, Facebook user. We can't see your name there. Let us know who you are. Yeah,
and we haven't mentioned Bazza, of course, but Bazza, he's still available out there. You can Google him up, or you get a copy of the thing. There's a thing where they've got it. Well, there's a 90 minutes of McKenzie mayhem that you can Google up, and then you've got the woke version that lasts 18 minutes and 3 seconds. So I would be very careful to play it to the children today, but it was quite innocent, simple fun back then, and wonderful memories for me.
Amazing, amazing. You've certainly brought so much joy to so many people. Looking back at all the people you've met through time now, you've obviously, being 88 and you're still so sharp and you're so entertaining at 88, and it just goes to show that, it's not about the years in your life, it's the life in your years, right? And you certainly have so much life and so much passion and so much zest about you. With those that you've seen come and go, what would you say has been the secret to your longevity as opposed to others who haven't made it to 88, which is probably not many, right?
Well, it's just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other. And when you come up against a brick wall, you break it down. It's like Barry Humphries always used to say, if you don't go over the wall, you'll never know what's on the other side. And so I think the trick of the whole thing, and throughout my career, when it's been, and there are whole big long passages of time when nothing's happening, and you think, oh, that's the end of my career. Then bang, something else comes along, and you've got to be ready to do it. And so it's just don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. Keep going, because you'll break somewhere along the line, hopefully. For all those young entertainers out there who are doing their best to be the entertainers they want to be, keep going. Just keep going. Something will happen.
Fantastic. And what advice would you give maybe your younger self, looking back at your life now and all the things that you've learned and achieved over time? What advice would you give a younger version of Barry?
Well, I think I've just said it. You just don't believe the critics that tell you that you're terrible, because it's back then, the wonderful thing back then, we could be terrible. We could go out and do a shocking show, and you had the chance to improve it the next night. Unfortunately, today, for the young performer, they have to be great straight away, and because you don't get those second chances, because there aren't the venues to work. So you've got to find your way. Everyone, you find the way to do it, and you'll find it if you keep going. Just as I said, keep going. Don't give up.
Yeah, love that. And how do you find, the changing world of technology? Facebook started in 2004. Now we have half the world's population on social media. How are you finding that over time, the changes in technology?
Oh, what they can do today is just mind-boggling. I mean, I just wish we had those sort of technical wonders, back when we were doing Sound of Music. We could, if we wanted to, we could be anywhere in the world just by throwing a backdrop in, and you believe that we were there. With AI and everything now, what is going to transpire over the next few years is going to be mind-boggling. I just hope that it doesn't get out of hand. But if they use it for good, and certainly in entertainment, it'll be just exceptional.
Love that. And how do you want to be remembered, Barry? What do you want people to say about you once you've passed on to the next version?
I think after this interview, it's just about time.
Yeah.
Look, I love Spike Milligan's. There was a lovely dear friend. On his, he wrote, "See, I told you I was sick." That's what he had written on his tombstone. I think just he wasn't a bad old bloke. He had made a few mistakes, as we all do, and he tried his best. He never gave up. Yeah, until now.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure people are going to say some wonderful things about you, and I'm sure they already are. And you have brought just so much joy to people and such a blessing to this world. And, following your passion, you've obviously loved what you've done. You've stayed true to the course. You've battled one challenge at a time. As you say, you've broken down those walls. And now what's the future hold for you, Barry? What do you look forward to?
Well, more great grandchildren. I've got another one's in the oven over there. It'll be my 16th grandchild.
Wow.
But generally, I just pop around here, pop around there, and I watch a lot of television. I love my television because I was a child of television. I used to watch the dot disappear when in 1956 when it first came out. So I love pictures and find shows, and I think that Australians are becoming. We're ruling the world now with our talent, not only in acting and technical abilities, but just the general way of putting together a show. Like we're doing those films on the Gold Coast now, which are just so exciting, and it's so rewarding, and I love seeing them. So it's a pretty nice time, have a cup of tea.
Yes.
Nice cup of tea and a lie down. That's what my mum used to say. Cup of tea, a lie down, and a Bex.
Yeah.
That's for the oldies. And eventually, I guess I'll turn into Barry Humphrey's Sandy Stone, who I loved, a character that used to say that he was so boring that he could make him sound very interesting, even talking about the toothbrush that had seen better days, perhaps, and he wondered about his wife who had passed on now, and but we miss her some of the time. That'll be me. That'll be me.
Oh my gosh! And I believe you like cooking. Is that right? Have I heard that right?
Well, I do. But my cooking is very, meat and veg and simple cooking, things that I saw my mother cook. She could make a roast lamb last for a whole week with all the different things that she'd be able to do with it. So they were hard times. But yes, I do. My spaghetti's well known, and that's good. And I do my roasts, and but I would like someone to do it for me, mind you. But I get a great kick out of when I finish doing it. I say, that wasn't bad, mate. Yeah, we'll have that again.
Oh, I love it. Oh, Barry, it's been such a pleasure. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we start to wrap up here?
I think we've covered a lot of bases. But as I said, the book, it's all in the book, and the Banjo Patterson one-act play, the audio play. I think we've covered basically. I mean, a lot of stories, a lot of different times that where I fell down and had to get up again. There've been problems in my life that I talk about. I think I'm not afraid to lay it out there because it's like all of us. We're all the same basically. Whether you're from Israel or Gaza or Hong Kong, we're all basically the same thing. We're all tied together, and it's very sad to find at my age that we're no closer. And the only thing that we haven't learned is that we haven't learned what awful pain the world is in at the moment. But I hope it's going to get better.
Absolutely. Yes. So do I. I hope it's going to get better too. And I think world peace starts with us. It starts with us loving our lives, loving ourselves, being kind to ourselves and others. And I think, doing what you're passionate about, doing what you love, certainly not just helps you be well known as much as we're also similar. People who follow their passions generally and who stay the course, who have that resilience, they end up being a household name like you are, Barry. And it's just such an honor to be chatting with you today. The longest live stream you've done, the longest online interview. I'm very honored. And it's like a marathon here. You've done amazingly. And we've been chatting for a good length of time here. And thank you so much for those who've been watching us as well. Lynn Santa says,
just finally, a household word or name, I just want to know which room.
Yeah.
Finish start on a joke, finish on a joke, mate.
It might vary for different people. You never know nowadays. So Lynn says, got to go, but totally awesome interview, both of you. Thank you, Lynn. We've got beautiful.
Thank
I know
you,
this
Lynn.
is Rita.
Thank you, Lynn.
The lipstick there, beautiful Rita from Red Peacock Cosmetics, which sponsors my lipstick and my makeup. Thank you so much, Rita. She says you look absolutely amazing. God bless you. She says also here, you're a legend, Barry. You're a legend. And oh, we've got beautiful Licia Malvine here. Lovely to listen in today. She's a fantastic singer on the Gold Coast. Licia just performed at our Animal Action Day for Aussie Wildlife we had recently. Licia's awesome. I also interviewed Licia about 20 years ago. She did a show at the Arts Centre as well, believe it or not. And we've recently reconnected, which has been lovely. Jeff says, every man has a story. Thank you so much. And for those who are watching the replay, please let us know what you thought of this show, any comments or questions that you have here. Licia says, thank you, Aldwyn. She's a beautiful lady, an amazing singer as well, amazing performer. And for those who want to connect with me, you can find all my links at linktree/Aldwyn. That's linktr.ee/Aldwyn. We have the Global Good News Challenge that happens every month, sharing gratitude and good news. We also have our Mass Media Mastery program where we help you be seen, heard, and known. And you can book a call in on my calendar link there as well. If you want to have a free connection and clarity call, then just reach out there through that link. And Jeff says, great show, guys. One of your best. Yes, absolutely. I would say one of your best. I think we're getting better with age. What do you think, Barry?
Well, everything gets better with age,
Yeah.
especially if you're into wine, which I'm not. But
Yeah.
and I'm not sure about that. I mean, I wish I could go back to being 35 again. God, I had a good time.
I bet you did. I bet you did. Well,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the joy you've brought, for your time today, Barry. It's been an absolute honour to be chatting with you here today. Thank you for your time. And here's wishing you the most successful and happy future with your beautiful growing family. Age gets better with wine. Oh, that's classic. Thanks, Licia. Age gets better with wine. Love that. Beautiful. Well, we're certainly preserving pretty well here, I think. So we've obviously done some right things over the years. Thank you so much, Barry. Any final words? Oh, God, someone wants to cook you a lamb roast. There you go. Any day. Merry Christmas.
Send it down. Send it down. Email it to me. Everything comes on the email these days, you know.
Yeah. And what is the best way for people to connect with you, or do they go through an agent, or what's the best way if they want to?
I think on Facebook or something. You know, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm trying to get on a couple of others, but I've got to learn to be a little more technical, I think, to be able to control the computer. It's been lovely talking with you today, and we had a few problems yesterday trying to get the technique of getting our pictures together, and not our bodies, but our pictures.
We got there in the end, and thank you to Craig Gower for helping with that as well. He hopped in.
Yes, Craig is,
Yeah, it was wonderful. And that's Rita, who's based in Sydney, and she's very happy to cook you a lamb roast any day. Rita from Red Peacock Cosmetics, amazing lady, dear friend of mine. So there you go. We already have dinner invites for you coming through, Barry. So that's wonderful, and I'm sure you won't be needing any Red Peacock lipstick. However,
well, you never know. I mean, everyone's changing these days, so you never know.
I love it. Thank you so much once again. Have a beautiful day or night wherever you are in the world watching this. Let us know what you thought. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, the Aldwyn Altuney Media Queen TV channel right there. And as Gandhi says, be the change you wish to see in the world. Do you have a favourite quote or motto that you live by, Barry, that you'd like to share in wrapping up?
Too many that when I lay down at the end of the day with my little prayers, going through all the family, all their names, and there are just too many. It's just, I think once again it's one of those ones where it's a private thing for people to have them, and it's just you talk to your God, whatever religion you are. You know, if you get through to that person, I think. You know, you're halfway there, and I think I get through to my person. I'm still here, so it must work. So speak to your God, wherever or whoever it is. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. And please support Barry. Get a copy of his book, Last of the Entertainers. I'm sure it's a scintillating read. We've only just touched the surface here today with the interview. Thank you so much. Yes, a lot of pictures. Jeff will share with the Aussie group here in Manila. Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. You'll be sharing the interview out and the book, no doubt, Last of the Entertainers. You'll find it in all good bookstores and also online. Thanks once again, Barry. Have a beautiful day, everyone. We'll see you again next time here on Media Queen.